Alright, so we apparently have a new idiot on the scene. Um, Ironically enough, this time it's not actually a Trinitarian. This time it's a Unitarian. If any of you have seen my first two videos, you know that I am not a Trinitarian whatsoever. So I would side more so with this guy, common sense Christianity, on the fact that Jesus is not God. However, this dude and many Unitarians believe that Jesus didn't pre-exist. They believe that he didn't exist until he was conceived by the Holy Spirit in the womb of Mary. Okay? So, he put out a video the other day, a live stream, which was a recap of him talking with God Logic. Now, again, if you've seen my first video, you know how I feel about God Logic. I think that he and his whole crew, Rogers, Shamoon, I think they're all retarded. Especially when it comes to the sun not knowing the day or the hour. They completely made up that Oiden being causative bullshit. That was absolute crap. Proved that wrong. They have no idea what they're talking about. However, Avery, God Logic, if you happen to be watching this video, I'm actually going to throw you a bone here, man. I'm going to help you out. Because now this dude, this moron, Common Sense Christianity, has said the most hypocritical crap that I've ever heard. Well, not that I've ever heard. I've heard some pretty out there stuff, right? But this dude is the most hypocritical person that I've spoken to in, let's just say, the past month. All right, let's not go too crazy with it. I was watching this video, right? And where I have it paused is the crux of why I'm making this, okay? He and God Logic in this part right here are talking about Jesus' role in creation, right? And the whole point that Common Sense Christianity brings up in this particular verse in Colossians 1 is that the things that are listed in Colossians 1 as being created is not all things, right? It says, because in him were created all things in the heavens and upon the earth, the visible and the invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things through him and unto him have been created, right? So God Logic's point, Avery's point is like, look, it says all things were created, heavens and earth, blah, 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 right? He's God, okay? Wrong, but I get what he's saying. So Common Sense Christianity says, no, read the verse carefully. If you look, it says all things in the heavens and the earth. So the heavens and the earth had to already have been created, right? And then it goes on to list only positions of power. That was his whole point. Whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, right? It only lists those things sandwiched between all things in heaven and earth, and all things through him and unto him have been created. Okay? So, what his point here is that Jesus didn't exist before being in Mary's womb. So when it's saying he created all things having to do with the church structure, with the spiritual hierarchy once he sat down at the right hand of God. He's the head of the body, and the body is the church, right? So that's his point, is that this is only talking about after he died and established like the church. And that's the only thing that it applies to, okay? And there's two reasons why this is absolutely retarded. One of them is having to do with the Greek itself, which is why I have the Greek pulled up here. The other is two additional verses that completely negate the entire argument that he's making, okay? Now, why am I making this video? Why am I coming out and attacking this dude like this? Well, let me explain, my YouTube friends. I went to this video, and I wasn't even attacking the guy, right? I said, look, this is... And you, by the way, you can't find this. This interaction, you cannot find on his channel anymore. Because the coward hid it from his comments. I know this because I looked up the video from a non-signed in account. Like, if you just type in YouTube, you can still watch videos. You don't have to be signed into an account. And I went and looked up the video. It's not there. I looked it up on another account that I have, which is tied to a different email, I don't see these comments either, right? And I know about hiding YouTube comments because I create videos on other YouTube accounts. I know about the functionality. When you hide someone's comment, it only appears to them and nobody else on the channel will see it, right? Which is why I, on my Prodigal account, am still able to see it. So, not only is this dude wrong, he also hides comments that prove that he's wrong, which I'm about to show you. So, I went on, not attacking him at all. I said, I'm not a Trinitarian, but I'm curious as to how you reconcile your beliefs about Jesus not pre-existing with what's found at Hebrews 1:1 and 2, where it specifically says God spoke through a son, not word, because that's his argument with John 1:1, is that in the beginning was the word. So it like he thinks of the word as like an abstract concept or like God speaking things into existence, right? And then it like figuratively was made flesh through Jesus. Okay? We're not here to debate that part, right? I think that the word is actually applying to Jesus, especially when you consider that in Revelation it says that his name is the word. Anyway, so I say where it specifically says God spoke through a son, not word, through whom he made the ages, world, universe. It depends on the translation, because that some things here, some translations translate that final word differently. Ages, word, world, universe, all things. I don't know any of them that say all things, but you get the idea. And then I said, additionally, 1 Corinthians 8:6 talks about how all things are from the Father and through Jesus. And there's no specific description about positions of power here, as the overall theme of this part of the chapter is about idols and false gods. And we're going to read both of these verses so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Well, this tool says again, as if he's exasperated that he has to explain this to somebody. That's what happens when you don't start in the Old Testament. Hebrews 1:1 clearly shows that God spoke in many ways to the prophets, but in the last days he spoke to us by the Son. Quit twisting what Scripture says. Go to the Old Testament, find the Son doing something. You can't. And that part is true. There's nowhere in the Old Testament where the Son is specifically mentioned. Trinitarians believe he's the angel of the Lord. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that he's Michael, right? Which in Michael, the ancient Jews thought that Michael was the angel of the Lord, so the Jehovah's Witnesses are kind of like in the middle there, right? They believe that, like they believe Jesus pre-existed, but is not God, but they believe he's Michael. Anyway, so this is the kicker, right? This is the absolute retardation of this dude. Through Jesus means because of Jesus. Again, go to the Old Testament, start there. Otherwise, you're wasting my time. I in no way attacked him or had an attitude in my comment. I said I'm not a Trinitarian, but I'm curious as to how you reconcile your beliefs. I wanted an explanation. I learned something from everybody, even if I think they're wrong. I learned something about how people think. And then again, this dude comes at me with an attitude. So, common sense Christianity, I don't know your real name, right? I honestly don't care. You did this to yourself by having an attitude. You don't want to come at me with respect as someone else who wants to just talk about the Bible, try and figure out what your views are, that kind of thing, right? You want to come at me with an attitude? Well, now I'm going to show everybody that you're a freaking moron, okay? So I replied with, there's no basis for assuming, because that's what you're doing, that through means because. There's a Koine word for because, and it's hati. If because is what was meant, that's what would have been written, as you like to point out when trying to disprove Trinitarians. And he says this all the time. A lot of people that argue against Trinitarians do. Why doesn't it just explicitly state that God is three, right? And while I think that's a valid argument, for him to not recognize that, but also use the argument against people, is disingenuous and hypocritical. All right? I said, but no. The book says through, so I'm not twisting what it says. I'm giving you exactly what the verse says. Okay? Before we continue, let's actually go look at that verse, because he says, I twisted Hebrews 1:1. I said about Hebrews 1, 1 through 2, where it says, God spoke through a son through whom he made the ages, right? I was paraphrasing, obviously, but let's look at that. It's specifically Hebrews 1, 2. In the last days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the ages. Again, ages, world, universe, whatever. That last word doesn't really matter. But all I said in my comment was, spoke through a Son, through whom he made the ages, world, universe. Has spoken to us in his Son. I just skipped this part. He appointed heir of all things, right? I just left that part out in my paraphrase. Through whom also he made the ages. Show me, common sense Christianity, where I misquoted the text here, or where I twisted what it said. Because if your whole argument is that the only part I left out was in the last days, the two following verses that I'm about to read are going to prove that that part doesn't even matter. Okay? So, back to what my third comment was. I'm giving you exactly what the verse says. Additionally, in 1 Corinthians 8:6, the same word for through, which is D, is used when it refers to all things being through Jesus as well as us being through him. Right? The word D. Whether you want to translate that as by or through, because some Bibles translate it, they say by him, yada yada yada, or through him, yada yada yada, right? But they essentially mean the same thing. It can mean by or through. I said whether you want to translate that as by or through, if the same word is used, it can't possibly mean because, as that would make absolutely no sense grammatically. All things are because of Jesus, like as in he's the reason, right? And we are because of him. Like we're the reason, or he's the reason that we are, right? Like see how that doesn't make sense? Okay? So I said that's what you're trying to get me to believe when you say that through means because. In both verses, I mentioned D is in the genitive. Now this is getting into some deep rules of the Koine language, okay? In both these verses, I mentioned D is in the genitive. And before we continue, I'm not even going to let you guys finish reading that. Keep this in mind. D is in the genitive. And listen to what he says to God logic. Or he doesn't actually say it to God logic. He says it in his recap of his video with God logic. I'm going to start this, let it play for a moment. Pay special close attention to when he starts talking about the genitive of D. All right?
Colossians 1 is telling you that Christ is the creator, the genitive dia, not the accusative. I don't agree with certain people that use everything was created in him, meaning that God created everything through him. I believe Christ is the active creator here for these positions of power. He's establishing the angelic structure and the church for the new kingdom. So he has.
Okay. He believes, based on D, the genitive version of dia, which is, again, D, it's just the contracted form of it. And if you need proof of that, right here. Dia, right? But in the verse, the contracted form is D. Now, this gets contracted when it's followed by a word that starts with a vowel, which you see here, out to him. So, this is the same thing, right? 1223. 1223 is the same thing. Again, just a contracted version. But anyway, he was saying in this video that because it's in the genitive, it means that Jesus is the one actively doing the creating. Okay? That's what he's saying about Colossians. He's saying that Jesus, because it uses the genitive, is the one actively creating the thrones, the dominions, the rulers, the authorities, all these positions of power. So common sense Christianity, I'm talking to you again now. If that's in the genitive, and it means that he's the active creator of all these positions of power, how is he not the active participant in 1 Corinthians 8:6 and Hebrews 1:2, where again, D is followed by the genitive form of the word? You see it right there. personal relative pronoun, genitive masculine singular. D governs it governs the word that follows right after it. That's how you can tell if something is the genitive case. Okay? So because whom is genitive, that means that D is genitive. Are we understanding? Okay? So Hebrews 1:2, D is genitive. Corinthians 1:8 or 1 Corinthians 8:6, by whom, again it can mean by. So by or through whom are all things, and we through him. Okay? Again, whom, oops, did not mean to click that. Whom, again, genitive, which means that D is again genitive. Let's listen to what he said for a second time.
Everything through him. I believe Christ is the active creator here for these positions of power. He's establishing the angelic structure and the church for the new kingdom. So he has an active role in creating. I think if you're going to go against somebody who's actually good at Greek, they'll demolish you on that. If you just try to say, well, it's not him actually doing it. The genitive dia is pretty clear that he's actually doing it.
Okay, so the genitive dia, which we've already established, is in 1 Corinthians 8:6 and Hebrews 1:2. In your own words, Common Sense Christianity clearly establishes that he's the one doing it. So explain to me then how these verses can be true if he didn't exist before being born, especially Hebrews 1:2. Through whom he also made the ages. Now, whether you want to translate that as ages, time past, world, universe, whatever, all of that pre-existed the earth and Mary. So if dia is genitive, as we've already established, and which you just in your own words stated means he is the one actively doing it, explain this to me then. You can't, because you're wrong. You have no idea what you're talking about. Let's actually look at Strong's Concordance for this. We're going to go to the the Thayer's Greek Lexicon. Dia. Written D, this is what I was talking about. Written D, as we see in these two verses, before a vowel, except in proper names. So again, autu, whom. Oh, I'm sorry. In this one, it's u. So vowel o. Here, it's two again. Where was I looking before then? Oh, okay, autu. Okay, him. Right. Okay. For Colossians 1:16, it says through him. All right. Anyway, regardless, in 1 Corinthians 8:6 and Hebrews 1:2, it's the contracted form because whom starts with omicron, which is a vowel. It's a Koine vowel. So back to Thayer's. Written D before a vowel. Okay, with the genitive. So this is the first instance of how D can apply. With the genitive, through. Of place, properly after verbs denoting an extension or a motion or an act. Right here. Of one who is the author of the action, as well as its instrument. Okay. In passages where a subject expressly mentioned is said to do or have done a thing by some person or something. How is that not this structure? Of God the Father, of whom are all things, and one Lord by whom are all things, or through whom are all things, right? We see that God is the actual creator of everything, but it's all through Jesus. How is that not the same structure as a subject expressly mentioned, said to have done a thing by some person, or through some person? Let's continue. B, with the accusative. So this is what it would have to be in order. Okay, let's go back to my comment before we get to that, right? So we've established that as genitive. I say in both verses I mentioned D is in the genitive and clearly means through. It would have to be accusative. I'm sorry, not causative. It'd have to be accusative to mean because of. Which again, going back to his comment, through Jesus means because of Jesus. That is what he's saying, right? So in order for that to be true, D would have to have been in the accusative case, which it's not. So then I said it's the same word you bring up around the 25-30 mark where you say Jesus is the active creator of the positions of power because the genitive of dia is used there. And that's what we listened to him say a moment ago. So how can he be the active creator there, but when the same word is used in 1 Corinthians or Hebrew, all of a sudden he's not actively through whom all things are anymore, and he becomes the reason, quote unquote, all things are. And then I egged him on a little bit. I said, "You're not serious, are you? Now who's twisting?" Okay. So, this dude is full of crap. The accusative is what he wants it to be to mean what he is saying. Of the reason for which a thing is done. By reason of. Of the reason or cause on account of which anything is or is done, or ought to be done, on account of, because of. Right? Accusative, not genitive, which the genitive is what's found in all three of these verses. So not only is common sense Christianity wrong, he conveniently applies the genitive rule when it's a verse that's specifically talking about positions of power, but then doesn't want to deal with the fact that it's a rule in these two where those things aren't mentioned, and where one of the verses specifically mentioned that the ages, world, universe, or whatever is one of those things that was created through Jesus, actively, genitive. And then on top of that, when I proved him wrong, he went and hid my comment like a coward. You are a coward. You're freaking... Where is it? Okay. He put a comment up on his own video. Look at this bogus comment, right? Now he's speaking to Trinitarians, but he says, you will be promptly removed, right? That's cool, right, whatever. Your own channel, okay? Nobody can tell you what to do on your own channel, all right? And then he says, this channel is for truth seekers, not for people who waste my time. So why are you hiding the truth from them? Common sense Christianity. Why are you hiding my comment from view of everyone else just because I proved you incorrect and showed that, yes, Jesus was in fact there when the universe was made. He pre-existed his birth or his conception in Mary's womb. This is why in every one of my videos, guys, anybody who's watching this, I tell you, do the research. We live in the age of the internet where you can find all of this stuff. All of it on your own. So that you don't have to listen to these liars, Trinitarian and Unitarian alike, who only want to apply certain rules or cases of grammar when it's convenient for them. When it conveniently applies to positions of power and not all things. Well, are you forgetting about these two verses? Common sense Christianity? Through whom? Genitive? Actively through? Not the reason for? Actively through? God also made the ages? You're an absolute moron. So, Avery, if you made it to the end of this video, man, if you ever talk to this dude again, ask him that. My gift to you. You're still absolutely wrong on the whole oide, oiden, causative thing. I guess you'll have to somehow reconcile that because, no, Jesus did not know the day or the hour, which means he's not God. So, you and Rogers and Shamoon, I guess you all have a powwow and figure out exactly how you're going to try to lie to people again about that one. But anyway, like, both sides, man. You guys are pathetic. Anyway, alright, I'm done.